We'll call the meeting to order. We're going to try to use the microphones tonight because we did the last video. It was a little tough on the sound, so if you're going to speak, try to grab a microphone and speak into it. Let's see, we don't even have our flag.
Well, I got flags on my shirt.
Oh, Dave's going to...
Wait. Hey, John, I got it on my belt.
We've done it when there's just been a picture on the wall.
Is that right?
I got them on my belt.
Okay, here we go, Dave. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job.
Thank you, Dave, for volunteering to be our
I
flag.
knew the shirt would come in handy.
We have opportunity, as we always do, for public input. Anybody from the public like to speak? All right, no worries. We're going to get right into board member introductions for the folks that weren't here last time. So we'll just go around. I'm going to say, Rob, you weren't here, so if you want to grab the mic, just introduce yourself.
Sure. Rob Duhane, actually town councilor for the district. We're sitting in number 2 right now, and vice chair of the town council. Did 9 years in the planning board before I got on the town council 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. It doesn't matter. Yeah, been in town since I was 11. I went to school with her brother and went through village school, and now I go back to village school where Matt and me used to go to school. And I'm in a little fishbowl going around, but it's a great thing.
Excellent.
All right.
Welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Kelly Thomas.
There you go. My name is Kelly Thomas.
And you're happy to be on this board.
I am happy to be on this board.
A woman of very few words, that's okay. Then Frank Kutowski was not here last time, so I'm going to pass that to Frank.
Thank you, John. For all of this crowd out here in the public and to all of you, I'm Frank Kutowski, just plain Frank from Hooksett. I moved here in 1977. I've been involved very much in this town over the years. As a town councilor, I'm currently a sewer commissioner. I'm a 12-year state representative in Concord, having chaired Health, Human Services, and Elderly Affairs. Probably the thing that I'm most proud of is having been a charter member and charter president of the Kiwanis Club of Hooksett. Some of you know some of the great things we've done here. I'm so glad to be on this committee because, believe it or not, you'll hear later about how long it's been since people in this community have expressed a desire to have a community center they can call their own. With that, I'll put this aside and say thank you for asking me to be your consultant.
Thank you, Frank. And the last person that we have here that nobody's met yet, or some people might have met last time, is Claremont Booten. He's behind the camera, but he's going to come up. Claremont's going to be our historian.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claremont Booten, and I'm retired from the Air Force. I was the staff accountant for the 157th Air Refueling Wing. Prior to that, I was a generator mechanic, and got my degree in business and finance and decided to go into accounting. And then when I turned 52, I said, that's it, I'm done. I'm out of here. After 32 years, I retired from the Air Force. So I figured I'd help out John. John and I are high school buddies. And anything I can do to help out here. My father-in-law lives over on Granite Street. My wife is from Hooksett, born here. And I'm proud to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. All right, with that, actually, why don't you, Claremont, could you just grab that microphone and bring right to Frank? So the next section of our meeting is reserved for Frank Kutowski, who's going to give us a history of community needs analysis. If that's correct, Frank, take it away.
Well, not really.
gotta turn that on. Little switch, yeah. It gives a couple seconds before it fires up.
Thank you, Red.
All right.
Thank you, John. Most of you are probably aware of the fact that over 20 years, there have been get-togethers in town. The first one was when the Kiwanis Club of Hooksett was formed in the year 2000. They were looking for a community project that would end up being their signature project, if you will. In order to find out what the needs were in town, we had to do what we call a community analysis. We do that from time to time. We look at the needs that are being met, and we look at the needs that are not being met. I recall back then, here in this library, meeting with a number of people. We called in the fire chief, the police chief, all of the religious groups in town, the school department, the social services groups, anyone that had anything to do with serving the public or getting things done in any way. Back then, some of you may recall, we had a very, very active, believe it or not, we had a recreation development director with Dale Hemian, who used to take care of a lot of needs in this town. What we did with this analysis was we got a listing by, what would I say, I guess we brainstormed, and we listed all of the things that were in town that we thought. Then we listed all of the things that we thought the town might like to have. Then we provided people with an opportunity, all of the people, and there were several people, I would say 40 or 50 at that time. That's more than we sometimes get at a town meeting. They then voted as to what the needs were in the community. We prioritized them by giving them each of these people who were there, I believe it was 5 votes. They got 5 stickers, they put them on the thing up there. And you know what came out on top at that time? Believe it or not, and it came to pass, thank goodness, was what you now know as the Heads Pond Trail. We were in a position to get land from Manchester Sand, Gravel, and Cement, who at that time was developing, had long-range plans to develop the quarries that they're mining right now on Route 3 across from General Electric and what used to be our old post office. Eventually, the town ended up approving a 400 and some odd development back in there that's never been built. But what we did was we froze in time the demands that we would place on them. In exchange for that, Manchester Sand, Gravel, and Cement provided our community with many acres of land. A lot of it was land that they could never develop moving forward. One piece of that land was what's known as the old Portsmouth, the Concord to Portsmouth Railway right-of-way, which was defunct in 1922. Kiwanis then, a very small group of people, got together, Fred Bishop, myself, I think Dave was involved, Matt was involved back then. We went to the department, to DRED, it was then DRED, Department of Resources and Economic Development, and we applied for a Trails grant, and we were successful. With that grant, we were able then to move forward on the piece of land, that narrow strip that runs from Route 3 across from Green Marine. There's a little parking lot there. Goes all the way back to the Heads Pond. Eventually, we hope to continue that, but let's just stop there. That was our first community analysis. People like this group got together then and made it happen. They made it happen because we talked about it, we found out what was necessary to get it done, and we made an effort to do it. Move forward now about 6 years. Our trail was in, and we were looking for another project. So we called together another one of these community analyses. analysis, did the same thing over again, and this time it was done in conjunction with the University of New Hampshire, who sent folks here, and over 3 days, there was a process that was gone through that led to the development of what is still in our master plan but never acted upon. Well, it's not your fault, Bob.
No.
Okay. I'm not pointing fingers, but one of the things that sometimes we have to do if we want to get things done is to take it upon ourselves to try to work together for public-private partnership cooperation. That's what this effort is going to do. Back then, the #1 item that came out, and I think it's still in our master plan, was a community center. Hooksett, as you know, is divided. We don't have a center of town. We have a river that divides half of our community, north and south. Unfortunately, we do not have a road in our town, a major road, that isn't a state road. Every one of the roads, if you look at 3A on the west side of the river, or you look at 3 on this side of the river, all of the roads coming into Hooksett are major arteries. So, people said they want a community center. But every time we think about doing something like that, there's a big dollar item. And to get a warrant article through on a town warrant is very difficult. So I think you have the right idea, John. I think working together like we're doing, trying to come up with these ideas, figure out what we want. We've never really scoped out what we want. That was the second time that we had this community analysis. The third time was probably, and I can't give you the exact dates, I have good memory, but I can't give you the exact dates, was about 8 years ago. And that occurred here again over 3 days. Wouldn't you know that one more time, the public said to us, we dearly need a place where people can come together from all parts of our community to do the kinds of things that communities do, folks do in the community. They wanted a community center. Back up about 4 years ago, the Kiwanis Club of Hooksett was looking again for another project, and we came up with another smaller analysis, but it came out that people wanted a couple of things. One of the things they wanted was a swimming pool, which was kind of out of the question because of the cost for our club. The second thing that kept coming up was a community center. So here we are, 4 times that I'm aware of, where people have absolutely said they want a community center. I hope that this group stays together. This is going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of planning. For us to be successful, I believe we're going to have to do our homework. John knows that. He's already outlined that to you. I read or listened to the videotaping, and thank you for doing that. It's a great thing to do. And you're right on. I think this group is right on. If we stay together and we can overcome some of the obstacles that are out there, and I don't care what anyone says, if you try to put it next to your house or my house or his house or her house or Mr. Booton's house, chances are you're going to get some objection to that. So the first thing I think we ought to really do is to figure out what we need in a community center, then go about looking at where might we think there is property that might be available, and then begin to work very subtly on those entities that, believe it or not, can make it happen. And I hate to say it, but more often than not, that's the business community. The business communities they're generous people. They make money in our community. They're willing to give back if we do our job right. And if we market it correctly, and if we overcome the obstacles, we will succeed. With that, John, that's all I have for you on that.
Great. Thank you, Frank, for that. History, for sure, was something I think a lot of people don't know, and I think this is the right time to do it, right at the beginning of what we're starting. And thank you for that. So, on the next thing on our agenda is a 501c3 registration update. Since our last meeting, we decided, this was after the meeting, but we decided that we, A, had to become more knowledgeable about 501c3s. And so we decided to put a committee together. I asked for volunteers, and thankfully I got some, more than myself. So we have a good group. We've got 4 or 5. Actually, I've got them right here. So Ross Santulis, Claremont Booton, Dave Scarpetti, Joe Paredes, and myself had one subcommittee meeting, and we just brainstormed. What we decided out of that is there are 2 things we need to do. We need to get information for the whole board so that we could all come up to speed on 501c3s, what does it mean. So what I did is, to put some skin in the game, I bought membership for us all up at the New Hampshire, I'm drawing a blank. New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits, thank you, Matt. It's a great resource up there. There's a lot of information. I know at least Kelly has logged in. She told me, and she was successful. I don't know if anybody else has logged in yet with the.
As part of the board of the Boys and Girls Club, I've been there.
Oh, you've already been there, so you already have an account. So go in, if you haven't gone in yet, create an account, because I want to make sure that nobody has any trouble getting in. There's a wealth of information out there, and none of us are experts, but we're going to become more knowledgeable through this project. So just want to make sure that was available. Now, of the subcommittee members, does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Anybody? Ross? Dave?
I talked to Cindy Robertson. Somebody mentioned that she would be a useful source, and it was difficult to track her down, but I finally talked to her, and she is not the person that can do it. She's never formed a 501(c)(3), so she suggested I talk to David Hess, who has done this before and could help us out tremendously with this. So he's on the Conservation Commission with her. I talked to Matt about it. Matt knows him pretty well, so hopefully we can at least get him working with this, and she seems to think he might do it pro bono. So that would be really nice. So.
Anybody else? Well, they're shy, so I'm going to speak a little bit for them. Some of the members brainstormed, and we reached out to different contacts, and so there's been a little bit of email chatter on reaching out to those different contacts. So like Dave has said, he's reached out to a couple contacts now. I also reached out, and I found this up at the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. It's called Harbor Compliance. Because one of the dilemmas that we see coming right out of the gate is you have to have a registered address for your nonprofit. And of course, nobody wants to put their home address as the nonprofit's address. And the way you do that is you have what's called a registered agent. So Harbor Compliance, who's out there giving basically free information, they have a registered agent that's by fee, payable by fee. And it's $99 a year, so if we want to go that route, we can. I also have a meeting on May 7th, and I'm going to, it's just a phone meeting, but with a representative from Harbor Compliance. And so we have kind of parallel things going on here, and we'll see what works out the best. If David is available and for pro bono, of course we're going to go that way because he's a local Hooksett resident. But if not, we'll have a plan B. I'll find out. It will cost money, so I will find out how much that will be, what all is involved. But basically they advertise, they take care of all of your registration paperwork. They have the registered agent service, of course. They make sure you're updated every year to know when your documents are due to the IRS. So it's a pretty powerful service. So again, just another piece of information that was available out at the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. One thing we have uncovered through our research is we're talking just to get in as a 501c3, you're at about $500 worth of registration fees. $400 of that is, I had it written down, but $400 of that goes to the IRS registration, and then there's $30 and $25 registration fees for the state of New Hampshire. So
In
you're,
other words, we have to be a for-profit in order to be a nonprofit.
we, say that again?
We have to be a for-profit in order to be a nonprofit.
What we have to do is get creative about getting some funding before we even start, because we can't ask for nonprofit donations, tax-deductible donations, because we don't have that status. However, none of us has another $500 hanging around that we want to donate to get this thing going. So tonight, we do have a non-public discussion, and so the good news is we won't have to kick everybody out because there's nobody here. But we do have a non-public discussion that won't be taped, and it has to do with an anonymous donation for our project to get underway. And we also may be able to discuss a little land research, just some of the places we've been going around town that the board can be made aware of that the public can't. So with that said, if anybody has ideas on other businesses or even citizens that would like to make a donation to help us get started, and you need a letter from the board, we're more than happy to put that letter together on behalf of the board as a request in case somebody would like that. So keep that in mind, and come to me or Dave with that request, and we'll make sure that happens. Go ahead, Frank. I think it's on. Yep.
Have we established a Facebook page?
No, we have not.
If we establish a Facebook page, there's and once we're a 501c3, I would suggest we do that, because there's a portion of that Facebook page that allows people to make donations. And that's one way to keep not only the public informed as to what we're doing, besides these kinds of things, but it's a way for people to be able to come in and see what the status of what we're doing is, and it wouldn't hurt to do that. I'm not technically inclined, and I think there are people in the room who might be, who know how to do that kind of thing. I don't. I'm too old, but I still use a typewriter with a ribbon on it. But other than that, that's a good thing. Back to what you were saying about 501c3.
Can I just interject with that? We'll have a little discussion on it.
Go ahead.
Right now, what we have is we have a website to centralize all of the data.
Yep.
On that website in the background, the back end of that is done by a company called GoDaddy. The reason to use them is they're fairly inexpensive to get up and running, and it's very easy to use their tools. One thing they have in the back end of that, though, that we haven't turned on yet, is a donation avenue.
That's what I'm driving at.
Yeah. So the only thing I would caution us is getting in too many electronic avenues that we have to maintain. We can take, I agree with your Facebook addition, but I would think we would just want to point them to the website, if that makes any sense.
Matters not to me as long as we're doing something along that line.
Yeah, we definitely will, but we have to first, I think, get established. I would not want to open it up to general, I would want us to have some personal requests for startup money, but we want to get established as fast as we can so we can do those tax-deductible donations. But go on, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm done.
Oh, I thought you had something else.
Well, I do. Relative to 501c3 and nonprofit organizations, I've got some information I'll turn over to you, John, and what it is really is the application, registration, New Hampshire NH Charitable Trust, for one thing. This is domestic nonprofit forms that we might need to consider, and we need to register with the Secretary of State's office, come up with a business name or whatever it is,
That's all done right now, isn't it?
and that's not a hard thing to do. I'll give you that also in case you care to look that over.
Yeah, so everything Frank's talking about is exactly what we're trying to line up here. We're either gonna do it through an attorney, working pro bono, or do it through a hired service that basically does it for us to make sure we have everything that we need lined up. That was one of the discussions we had at our subcommittee meeting, is, you know, we basically said, hey, let's just do it ourselves, which is definitely an avenue, but we want to make sure that whatever we do is done right at the very beginning.
May I interject?
Sure.
I'm glad you said that, because I was a member of a particular organization in this community who over the years was a 501c3, who ended up failing to do some filings with the IRS some years ago, and who ended up paying dearly for not having someone looking over their shoulders, such as you're suggesting. A company that does that would have saved them an awful lot of money. It happened to have been the Knights of Columbus that owned a building on Route 3. They ended up selling the building, and they finally were made whole, but it cost them thousands of dollars to be able to rectify that little oversight that they happen to have. So I think it's a good idea to hire someone to do that,
Yeah,
once we have the money to do it.
right. So we'll see. It's all great input. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to talk about this stuff. None of us are experts. We're all gonna learn something.
Just a point, it's unfortunate, you know, it's one of those things of asking the town for money to seed something like this is, you know, of course, taxpayers' money. You have to write a warrant and go through all sorts of steps, but again, it's one of those things of, I'm glad that I'm sitting here so I can at least keep the council, what's going on, and then, of course, pick up on what he was saying earlier. 2004 was the last real master plan happened in this building, upstairs. I forget how many hours it's on a CD or tape. It had to be several hours. 300, 400 residents came in. I mean, all this, we've never taken that much information from residents since. The Jordan Institute, they came in, Southern New Hampshire University. We've had multiple, besides UNH, look at this, and there's a lot of paperwork and stuff at Town Hall that will tell you, and a lot of those things, it comes around. Maybe it was 4th on the list, maybe it was 7th on the list, but it was a community center. Again, the seniors have been asking us for an outdoor pavilion. What do they get for their money? Where do they have to go? It's a short season pavilion outside. It's not really a community center. Even if you had a community center, let's put a pavilion next to it. So it shows you how this is the whole idea. The community, in one way or the other, you keep going around, is willing to support this. That's what you got to remember from my point of view. If we did have a warrant article, if you had something that came up in time, is the community going to support it? Well, if you look at the surveys and you look at that's a priority. Sooner or later, it would be. That's one thing. We were close to putting a pavilion on the warrant for this last year, and didn't. So again, it's one of those things of where do people meet in the summertime in Hooksett? I have to get back to you on that. It's not there's no central location where you can. There's a bathroom, parking, all those issues that this community center hopefully will solve.
On the idea of a warrant article, one thing we've said kind of from the get-go on this is we want this project to be supported by people who want to support it. Right. In other words, we're going to be very careful in trying not to get involved with taxpayer funding, okay? The funding ought to come from resources that are in the community that want to support the project, but because they want to, not because so many people showed up at a town meeting and voted. Right. And we don't want to get any negative going towards the community center, especially at the very beginning as we're building it up and we start to market it later on. So that's my only caution to the board, is we be careful about that and try to tread lightly on the taxpayer. That's I think something that we need to really keep in the back of our mind as we move forward. So since the last meeting, we had a meeting, the Vice President David Scarpetti and I, on April 2nd. We met with a representative from Southern New Hampshire University. You want to talk about that, Dave?
Sure. So John and I had a few meetings with this lady, Libby. Her office is down on Elm Street, and we've been had been meeting with her prior to this, when we were just talking about a splash pad, for their support. And so she's very interested in getting involved with what we're, what we're interested in doing, is building a community center. And so, because of what we want to put in this community center, it's going to be to their advantage, because part of their criteria, their curriculum is sports, and so we can get them involved with maybe managing this at the same time, and having like a SNU room, so these rooms would have different, maybe different names for different businesses that we have in the area. So there could be a merchant's room, there could be a SNU room, and to get them involved with running the facility and so forth. So I guess that's...
Yeah, that's good. Dave, I just want to add to that. Libby's title is the Vice President of Office of External Affairs and Communications. And she's very easy to talk to. And again, this idea, SNU is very excited about, because one of the things they said is missing in Hooksett is a good idea for employee retention, because they have basically all these professors and folks that work at SNU, but they don't really have a lot of activities besides Manchester to draw them to stay in Hooksett. So this would be a fantastic idea, not only for the students, but also for the employees of SNU. So we're very excited about that, and hopefully we can establish a really good relationship with SNU with this project. As Dave said, one of the things we talked about was a dynamic classroom opportunity, because they do have the sports management, and they also have a nonprofit management coursework at SNU. So that would actually fold in really nicely with this project. So we're just at the beginning, we're just establishing the relationships, but there were some really good ideas that came out of that meeting that SNU was very interested in. So the other thing we have for tonight, we had the review of the bylaws. Now, these bylaws templates, they exist in a lot of places. This one came from the New Hampshire Center of Nonprofits. Yeah, and so basically, there's going to be a bunch of paperwork that we need to get submitted. Frank brought some examples tonight. But you've all had an opportunity to review this. I'm not sure if you did your homework, but if you did, does anybody have any questions on what we're presenting here? This would be one of the things that, depending on which road we go, pro bono attorney or a service, it would be a document like this that we would submit and add anything we wanted special on there. So if you haven't reviewed it, just take some time, read it over. I think you even see in the document there'll be change bars where there's been some stuff added that I added in.
Right, there was some red stuff online.
Yeah, and basically the key points there was that we're involving the public, which is not standard. A lot of nonprofits don't include the public. They don't have public meetings, they don't videotape. So that's one thing. We're doing a hybrid model here, that we want to get the public involved, we want to get their input. It's the only way this project is going to move forward, with the public support. So that's one of the changes I should say I made to the bylaws for the board to review. Anybody else have any input on the bylaws?
No, it's just, what was it, 12 members? What was the number? I think
Yeah, that's a requirement. I think it was 3 members is the minimum requirement.
There's something I read there, it was like maximum, minimum, it was like,
Yeah. I have to check here.
Well, anyways, yeah, I can clear that by the next week.
Yeah, it's, there's so much stuff in here. But they do have,
21.
they do have a minimum.
Yeah, because you have to have so many officers, never mind.
Right.
And again, that's one of those things, if SLU has a class, that's one thing the town is still realizing now, that this is a huge resource that's underutilized in this town. I mean, we're just out of nowhere, within, a few months ago, and now we get $200,000 for a fire truck. We're pleasantly surprised and glad to be moving forward, so we're hoping to expand on that relationship. So.
Yeah, so that's what we're gonna try to promote, and that was, our meeting was just a start. We're right at the beginning. All right, so I don't think, we don't need to approve the bylaws tonight. Let's just, everybody take a peek at them. If you have anything you want to add, let me know, and we'll get them modified, so that when that time comes and we need to submit bylaws, we'll have something ready to go.
Maybe, Mr. President, maybe next meeting, we can go through each article and just, maybe explain each thing, so everybody can add their input at that same time. Or do you want
Or
to just
tentatively agree on each one of them, so we don't have to go over it later,
Yeah,
So it shouldn't take that, maybe we can do some of them one meeting and then, just like working on the master plan, they work on a chapter a month. And
Right.
so we just maybe go through each one of them
sure.
individually.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, we can start that tonight if you'd like. I always want to try to keep the meetings as tight as possible, because I know everybody's got busy schedules. So I think, to your point, maybe we'll plan on doing that next meeting. We'll start doing some of the review.
Yeah.
And we'll just start right from the beginning. We'll go maybe a couple pages, 2 or 3 pages in.
Right.
That's something we can do every meeting until we get through it.
Frank, would these be the same type of bylaws that like Kiwanis would?
Pretty much, except Kiwanis has to use the format provided by International.
Okay.
This is pretty
Generic.
yeah, boilerplate,
Yep.
and I think it's, I read through them, I don't see anything wrong with this at all.
Okay.
A lot of people use this, it's good, I think, just making sure that we have the number of people sitting around the table
Yep.
written in here.
Yep.
No, these are fine, I don't see
Okay.
anything wrong. You can always amend them.
Okay.
Right. Okay, does anybody else have anything, new business? Anybody want to bring up, you'd like to add on to the agenda for next meeting? We're all good?
No, future meeting, for a future meeting.
I'll just offer something.
You wanna grab
I'm
it?
sure. I know we have one committee already formed for the 501c3, but looking ahead, I think, Frank, you may have mentioned that I think the purpose of this building, we have to look at kind of how we're serving the community from the inside out. So I recommend that we give some thought in forming a subcommittee with the purpose of finding effective programs, and maybe even consider, as we build this, concurrently, we have some type of programs ongoing in a facility that's available, such as the library, to kind of test to see which programs will be effective once the building is built. And I think the benefit from that will be, as we start to ask the public for their support, and we market this, if they start to see some return on investment and some attention in the community, then people will be attracted to it, and I think it will snowball even more. So I would recommend, I guess I'm making the motion, or recommending that the next meeting we try to form a subcommittee on program.
Is anybody second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Frank Katowski. Discussion, anybody want to discuss this?
Yes. Lately, Matt and I and others have had occasion to visit several Boys and Girls Club in conjunction with some of the things that I'm doing and his wife does with Kiwanis. And what we're finding out is that there's an awful lot of interest in Boys and Girls Clubs. Recently, we had to move in this town our Fun in the Sun program from the town hall to a school. Wouldn't it be nice if we contact some of the Ys or whatever they might be, Boys and Girls Club, to see if they have an interest in establishing a satellite unit here in Hooksett that we could help support them, they could help support us. It's just another idea, but they do have meeting rooms, they provide all kinds of opportunities for groups in the community to meet there. I went to Milo, Maine about 2 weeks ago. It's 285 miles away from here. I didn't realize how far north we can go in Maine and never get out of there. This little community of Milo, Maine has again, a Kiwanis Club. They're in the middle of nowhere. That's the focus of everything that happens in that part of Maine, is they own their own community center that happens to be the Kiwanis Club owns the darn thing. It's amazing as to what that community relies upon. I drove into town, I couldn't find where am I going? I have no idea. I drove up, I went to one place and I said, can you tell me where? Oh yeah, that's right down the road here. That's Kiwanis. Everybody meets there. They all know it. It's a community center.
The Boys and Girls Club of Salem.
Boys and Girls Club in Salem.
Started with
That's right.
the Kiwanis gave them, I don't know, $10,000 to start their club.
That's right.
And they've been supporters ever since. They meet in the same building.
So that might not be a bad
Great
idea
synergy.
to look at, to have some of us approach people in these various, in surrounding communities that have the larger ones. I know that the Y in Concord has a satellite operation in the town of Allenstown. Do they not, Bob?
Right, correct.
And you know, those are the kinds of things that could be in a community center. So the idea would be to get them also to be talking about opportunities that might be, allow them to expand whatever it is they do.
Sure.
You know, just a thought.
Good ideas. So my input is more of a question. So with this subcommittee that you're recommending, what would be a goal of that subcommittee? Is it to establish working programs in Hooksett, or to identify what we want to see in the community center?
I think the first step would be to identify programs that the community wants. So, by age range, I have 2 young children. My needs are different than those that are retired and that are looking, seniors looking for things to do. And then ultimately move that from doing some testing of what, okay, so we have this group of people that would like a place to meet on a certain topic or a certain activity. How can we test that now to see how that can be effective in the community center? So just start to get people to come together. I mean, what takes place at the library is amazing. There's tons of kids programs, but if they have, if they've identified a need that the community has that they can't meet here, but we know of spaces in town that can be rented, that can be built, space can be, Southern New Hampshire University can offer some space for part of the week, then we can start to make those connections. But I think the first step would be identify the programs, and then from there, move towards identifying which ones we want to implement and test, and look to see which would be the most effective in rallying support for donations.
Anybody else? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Now, I think we're going to appoint the chairman of this committee.
Joe, thank you.
I think we should nominate Mr. Santos. Yes.
Okay.
Do we have a second on that? You second it? What a great mom. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. All kidding aside, I mean, I know everybody is really busy, and so it's hard to get some of the cycles sometimes. And one thing we gotta be careful about is, since we have a limited number of people, a limited board, we have to be careful not to get too many things going at the same time, because then, A, we're gonna get burnout, and then we will get less accomplished, I think. So that's the only thing I caution the board on, is we have to be careful not to put too many pokers in the fire, I guess, at the same time. So I think it's a great idea, and I think it's a good time to get it going, organizing, so good job. Anybody else?
How often do you plan on wanting to meet?
I basically told everybody when we started, we try to just meet once a month. I think if we try to get, as you see, when you try to get this many people organized all at the same time, it's very difficult because of everybody's schedule. So I'll ask the board, what do you think? Do we meet once a month? Do we eat less, more? What would you like? Go ahead, Frank.
I would suggest that before we do that, we come up with a plan, a step-by-step plan as to what is the next item on our agenda. After that, what's the next thing we have to do? What's the next thing we have to do? And that's to what you were saying, John. We don't want to start doing things that might come at the end up front. I think he's right on. Before we can size a building, we have to know what might go in that kind of a building. So I would think that somehow or other we ought to spend a meeting doing nothing more than coming up with a plan. What comes first, what comes second, what comes third, what comes fourth, and we not move to those things until we get those first things done. That just makes sense to me.
I think the first thing we need to do is make sure we have an attorney on board. But
Absolutely.
in conjunction to that, I think we can start working with the ideas for the building, because that wouldn't, once we have an attorney on board, we really can just give him the full okay to go, or do we have to vote on it all as a group, or how do we want to do that?
For what now?
For the attorney to do the nonprofit, to form the 501.
We just decide whether we want to do it ourselves or have someone else do it.
Right.
My thought would be you either hire one of these outfits that's already in existence to do it for you, or you have an attorney do it if they're willing to do it pro bono.
And then
But they have to be a member of this board, I would think.
Okay. Because they would have to update it on a yearly basis then. Or keep
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to get an attorney to do something like that pro bono. Very hard.
Well, maybe if there's a yearly fee, after he gets it going, maybe if there's a small yearly fee to keep it going, I mean, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't have a problem with that, instead of paying somebody, at least we have somebody from our community.
I agree. Even in Kiwanis, I don't think we have an attorney in Kiwanis. No.
No.
It's very difficult to get someone to get involved in something like this because of the fact that we all want it for free.
Right.
That's the first thing, they don't want to admit their
Dave is
attorney.
one of the finest people in this community when it comes to pitching in over the years. He's done an awful lot. If he were to come to us and say, I'd like to do this for you, I would say, God bless, please, come on.
Okay.
That's my thought.
I was hoping by the next meeting, we'd have more information. Because again, we're right now in that exploratory phase, as we talked about at our little subcommittee meeting. And what I think I heard tonight is you've made some connections, some we found that we weren't good, and we're gonna explore another one with an attorney in town. So I'm hoping by next meeting, I will have had my meeting, and you will have yours, and we'll be able to make a decision as a board to move forward. Or we may both come back with data that tells us we still need some digging to do. We don't know that yet. But that's how I kind of foresee it going on. You know, it's like Frank said, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So it's going to be incremental, and sometimes it's going to feel like we're at a snail's pace, but it is just the nature of the beast, and we want to make sure we do it correctly starting out. Matt, it looks like you got something.
I wanted to say something. This is sort of, this may be a little bit premature, but I was approached by a friend of mine this week, and I think he had something, he knew something about the SNU meeting, so it was some kind of connection there. But the name is Ben Brown, and he works for Landry French Construction in Portsmouth. And he was telling me that he knew what we were sort of looking to do, and what they've done in the past for nonprofits. And of course, we have to be one first. But is, you know, we go out to raise money for a community center, we have to have something concrete, a plan, a design, an elevation, whatever. And he said that they would be willing to do this pro bono, and they would actually contact architects, and they would do something at a very sort of high level. But we definitely would have to have something more concrete. So this, you know, it's definitely something to think about.
Sure. No, that's great.
It's out there.
You got something? So you can take that.
I just have a quick question for the board to ask. What does the board think, or how are we going to track our funds before we get established as a 501(c)(3)? How are we going to track that money before the bank account comes, before we actually have 501(c)(3)? I just wanted to ask you, how do you want to do that?
So I'll just take a stab at it. I was hoping that we could establish a bank account under the name of a nonprofit, with the bank's understanding that when our documents got processed, that they would get all that, the tax ID and all the other stuff that goes along with a nonprofit. But you tell me, because you guys are the accountants, if you know.
I don't think the bank will even let you open an account without a tax ID number.
So it's a chicken before the egg type of a problem.
It is.
So save all your receipts.
Right. This is a very good point, and that's why we hired you, for the big bucks.
There you go.
No, it's a very good
I
point.
don't know, if you have money coming in, you can't even accept it, right? Right now, you have no place to put it.
Yeah, we don't,
The cash box.
yeah.
Just go to pocket.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So who would like to volunteer, accountants? Would you like to volunteer to research that? Or do you already know?
No, I don't know.
I don't mind getting some information on that, but it may require somebody here establishing an account and then switching it over. Somebody I don't know how it would work,
Yeah,
but I'll find out when I can.
yeah.
And I can work with Elaine, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because the idea is, again, we have some sizable fees right at the beginning, and we're going to need the money to pay for those sizable fees. We can't really do fundraising for a nonprofit and accept that money as a tax deductible donation, because we haven't made our established 501(c)(3) yet. So it's a great question, Oliver. So let's see if we can do a little research and come back with an answer by our next board meeting. But it's actually a good lead-in for our non-public portion of the meeting. So does anybody have anything else for this meeting, or you'd like to see on the agenda for next meeting?
Well, can we still open an account
Yes.
under the builders community, Hooksett Community Builders, and then, in the meantime, form the 501, and then you might have to change some type of an account number. So you get a federal ID number now under the Hooksett Community Builders, and then you switch it to a nonprofit.
That's exactly what happened when Kiwanis was formed.
Yeah.
Right.
It took us probably 3 or 4 years before we became a 501c3 entity, but we still had a checking account under Kiwanis.
But the only thing there, Frank, is you had a mother ownership, right?
That's true.
Hooksett Kiwanis had a, so I don't know if we'll,
But that's what she's gonna find out.
yeah, exactly, yes. So we don't know
Which
the
banks?
Tamitha Laramie,
You ever
or
talk to Tamitha?
Stephanie Andrus, or Beth Sullivan, they'll tell you.
Tamitha at TD Bank.
TD Bank.
Tamitha, she's the manager there.
Yeah.
If you need to go, I know her pretty well, so I just got her into Kiwanis, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got her to join.
All right, so if there's no other input for this meeting or an agenda item, feel free again, if you come up with something for the agenda for next meeting, go ahead and just email it to me. That's fine.
That was the only subject we didn't quite close on yet. When is the next meeting and how often are we having meetings? But I think until you get rolling, once a month for now, but again, as more information comes in and a lot of different aspects start to move forward, maybe we'll need more meetings, but for now, that's
Yeah, we just, again, to Frank's point, you know, I keep going back to this, I think I said at the last meeting too, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
right.
And what I don't want is I don't want board burnout. I want everybody that's volunteering their time to be happy they're coming to these board meetings and happy that we're making progress. And at the same time, I've seen too many boards where people just get burnt out by having too many meetings.
That's the budget committee, that's all I'm understanding.
Right. So we'll play by ear, but I think what I'm hearing from everybody is once a month is good for people's schedules. And we'll make incremental progress together. And so if there's no other input, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Should we set the date for the May meeting?
Well, we're basically shooting at the end of the month, but I was just going to do it by email.
Okay.
Because right now, everybody may not know exactly what their schedules are.
What night is good for everybody?
Yeah, Tuesday night works for me, with Monday, Wednesday.
Tuesday a good night?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
Tuesday, yeah.
So be looking for whatever the last Tuesday in the month is.
28th.
It'd probably be, if we can be consistent on that, that would be great.
Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
Oh, is it really?
Tuesday?
Well, it's Tuesday.
Yes, it's
After the
Tuesday.
weekend now,
Yeah.
so just straighten it up and make it here.
You know it's gonna be hard.
If you get stuck in the lake traffic, we'll understand.
All right, so look for an email coming out after. So this meeting is adjourned.